Hi, it's Papis again, and this time with a few tips about subsurface scattering. Well, perhaps even just one tip. I don't know, let's see. Now let's see what we have here. I have this very simple scene which is lit from well, a couple of lights. In this case I'm dealing with RenderMan, but what I'm about to show you will work more or less the same, at least basically, with any other renderer, I guess. So let's go and render this. I'm still having some problems with the R's. So here's our render. Of course it's very low res, very low sample count, just a very crude test basically, but I already have here some subsurface scattering, so let me show you the material itself. Now as you can see I'm using the pixel surface shader and the Jensen dipole subsurface model, but it really doesn't matter which renderer you use or even which subsurface model you use for these couple of things to matter for you, what I'm going to show you now. Because basically it's all about, well, lights and cameras. Okay, we have a few spheroids. Okay, let's call them grapes. Now, as you can see, I already have the subsurface applied. You see that it makes a difference between gain 0 and 1, or anything in between actually. But the thing is that it looks, it actually looks like it has some ambient lighting on it or something, you know, boring and flooded like that. Now, if I change the mean free path distance, in this case it actually means something like the distance that the light travels inside these spheres without scattering, you'll see that actually it doesn't do any difference. Now, let's see why this happens. As you can see, I have these couple of lights here, and the camera is actually placed between them, which means that we're basically looking at the scene or rendering the scene more or less from the most lit area. Now, what subsurface scattering is best at is actually looking at things that are lit from behind. Okay, let's see what happens when we look at this actually from behind. You see I've moved the camera right now. Let's enlarge it a bit so we can see what happens. Now the camera is positioned from more or less you know, opposite the lights, and I can see that I have some okay, I can see that I have some lighting, you know, the reddish tint here, but let's see if it's the backscatter. And backscatter, so it's if it's the subsurface scatter, it's not backscatter, is something else. But anyway, here it is, and now let's see if it really makes a difference. And this time you see that it makes all the difference. Okay, you can argue about the beauty of it. You can't argue about the beauty of it. It's ugly, but you see the difference that it makes. And let's go to like 100, and you see that it simply floods everything from behind, and it's so different in the contribution here that you know, the contribution that the subscatter has. Again, subscatter, subsurface scattering. Well, you know what I mean. So again, let's turn around here and go to the lighting from here. Okay, and if I'm here and I'm at 1 or at 100. It almost makes no difference. I mean, if anything, it dims the lighting here a bit. There is a reason for that, but I'm not going into the Jensen dipole method here. But you see, for instance, that from 1 to, let's say, 10, there's nothing. There's no difference. And again, it's simply because the camera is positioned where the light comes from. Okay, so let's add a light source, actually a backlight. And okay, so now here's our backlight. As you can see, it's quite small, but it's aimed almost directly, well, actually directly towards the grapes, and a bit towards the camera, but not quite enough perhaps, we'll see. But what I need to do now is see its contribution. Now, as you can see, it really doesn't make that much of a difference at first glance, at least. If I just put its intensity down to 1, it acts as if, let's say, something like a bit of a rim light, perhaps. No, not even that. So let's make it stronger. Now in RenderMan and other renderers, I can make this light stronger simply by making it bigger. In many cases, this can be very helpful, and even here you can see that it is quite sufficient to add some kind of rim lighting here, which can be very nice. But it's not a very good thing to do when you do subsurface scattering, because then this rim light here, or this backlight, actually lights the surfaces directly. This is direct lighting, what you see here. And direct lighting is not something I want to add to if I want to emphasize the subsurface scatter. So what I will do in this case is actually something different. I'll keep this light quite small, quite focused. I'll even do it, quite. I'll point it almost directly to the camera. I don't want to do it, of course, to point it directly to the camera, but I want it to be behind the objects as much as I can. And okay, now this is better, and I think even just a bit more. Okay, and now I'll make it stronger in a different way, the usual way, which is simply, in my case, I like using exposure instead of intensity in these lights, but whatever works for you, just make it stronger. Now, as you can see, still it doesn't really have that much of an effect, and I don't want to do something like, okay, not something like this, but what I should already do, because it's lighting, and I'm not going to go too much into stage lighting and stuff like that, not now, but I can simply, and I should, make the contribution of other lights in the scene a bit less emphasized, even much less emphasized. And now you see that, well, the image is a bit darker, of course, but now I can see here the effects of the subsurface lighting. Now don't forget that usually you will have lighting that is a bit more like this, which is very strong. So again, it will still be a very good idea to simply put this light just where it is, because if you see what happens, let's just go and hide it again. See what happens here in the shadow areas when I just hide that backlight. You see what happens here, how dark it gets, and that's actually what I would expect from a subsurface scatter light. Okay, now the light is blocked. We have quite a bit of shadowing going on. I'm not using a window here or a portal or light portal, because in the outside you usually don't have that. Okay, inside scenes or interior scenes, yes, but not really an outside scene. But still, you have many objects that are deflecting light and blocking light. So that's actually what I'm very lazily trying to duplicate here, literally duplicate, because I'm actually duplicating the objects here. But you see that when I add some objects and I still keep the global illumination coming in, as you can see, so these are just objects that are blocking the light, but they are not blocking all the light, which is very important, because the global illumination still passes through and lights everything from everywhere, and that's how it goes. Okay, now let's just render this and see what we get. Okay, so here it is rendered, and again, I'm not trying to make it look nice. I'm not using any gobbles, filters, not even denoising, nothing. Not even light portals or anything like that. I'm just trying to make us see the difference between using a light, or rather a backlight, and not using it. So what I'll do again is the same render, only without the backlight. So this is the backlight, and now it isn't. And now let's render again. So here's the previous image with the backlight. This is the new one, which is rendering right now without a backlight, but everything else is the same settings, the same all-round lighting, and of course the same subsurface scatter model with the same settings. I think I've said that. Let's give it a few minutes. It will probably take like 20, I'm afraid, and we'll be back. And we're done. Here are the differences. First of all, well, this is I'd say, I can't say nicer because none of these photos is really nice, but you can see the effect of the subsurface scatter, and let's focus on on some areas. First of all, sorry for the noise, but it's good enough for our purposes. You see this greenish softness here, and see what happens without that backlight. This actually is all the difference. Okay, all the difference that you need. Especially look at this shadow here, and here it is, and again look at the halo here. You see, which is, by the way, probably also because of direct lighting. Let's be honest, but these are not because of these areas. Are definitely not because of direct lighting. If you look here, for instance, see the difference. All this softness, all this I don't know, glowiness. This is actually also here in a lit environment, or in a lit area. I hope you can see the difference here, and especially at the bottom. It is a bit more shaded, but also even here. Okay, even in this area, which is very lit. This is actually what you want from a subsurface scatter path, and this basically is the whole. Let's straighten this. This basically is the whole effect that you need to make something more realistic or smoother, or more liquidy. Okay, I don't know if liquidy is a word, but similar to an object containing liquid, or some sort of gel. So that's it. Sometimes it's a very good idea to put a backlight behind your objects when you want them to do subsurface scattering. Even if your scene is well lit, actually it's even more important to do this when your scene is well lit, because the effect of the sub-scatter is sometimes lost. If you find this little tutorial, or well, rather this little tip helpful, please feel free to comment, or like, or share, of course, tell your friends, and please visit me again. I was Papis. Well, actually I'm still Papis, or Moshe, depends on how well you know me, and this had been fun. So have a nice day, thank you for being with me, and a happy new year.